It was another quiet rotation in the heart of the Galactic Empire. For countless generations, peace had ruled these skies. Every world, every moon, every star system followed the Empire's laws. Its maps stretched across galaxies. Its scanners could detect the faintest spark of life even before it took its first breath. Nothing moved unseen. Nothing entered their space without permission, or so they believed. Far out in the silent darkness, a monitoring station floated above a barren world. It was routine work for the officers there, watching the scanners, logging energy signatures, keeping track of asteroid movements. Most days passed without a single alert. The hum of machines was the only sound. That day, however, something unusual appeared. It was small at first, a faint pulse barely visible on the main screen. One of the junior analysts leaned closer, frowning. He thought it was just static interference, maybe a glitch caused by cosmic radiation. He reset the scanner. The pulse didn't vanish. Instead, it became clearer, stronger, more defined. He zoomed in. The readings made no sense. There was no energy source, no propulsion signature, no heat trail, yet the object was moving. Slowly but definitely, it was heading straight toward the Empire's border. The officer called his supervisor. Within seconds, the entire control deck was awake and focused on the strange object. Data screens flickered. The technicians compared readings, cross-checked frequencies, and ran system diagnostics. Everything seemed normal. The problem wasn't with their machines. It was with what they were seeing. When the command center confirmed the anomaly, the report was sent up the chain immediately. Within hours, it reached the Imperial Command Fleet. At first, the higher officials dismissed it as a false reading, another harmless meteor or perhaps a decayed satellite from one of the outer colonies. But as more stations picked up the same signal, doubt turned into concern. The object was small, barely the size of a single escape pod. It had no identifiable markings, no registration codes, and no sign of technology the Empire recognized. But what made it terrifying was how it appeared out of nowhere. Their long-range sensors, which could see across light years, had detected nothing before that moment. No jump signature, no wormhole trace. One moment the space was empty, the next it was there. That had never happened before in the entire history of the Empire. By the time the Central Command began tracking it directly, the strange object had already entered the Imperial Zone. Security protocols activated automatically. Patrol ships changed formation. Drones were sent to investigate. But every time they approached the object, their systems malfunctioned. Cameras went dark. Communication links broke. The only image they managed to capture was a blurry outline of something metallic, drifting quietly. Inside the council chambers of the capital world, the atmosphere was tense. High-ranking officers, scientists, and the Imperial advisor gathered around the holographic display. They zoomed in, analyzed the readings again, and discussed every possibility: rogue experiment, natural phenomenon, or perhaps a hidden enemy probe. Then one of the biologists noticed something unusual in the data. The object emitted a faint but consistent biological rhythm, a pattern similar to a heartbeat. A human heartbeat. The room went silent. Humans were a story from ancient archives, beings that once existed long before the Empire was born. Their history was chaotic and filled with war, but their spirit of survival had made them legends. The last known record of human existence was millions of cycles ago. After that, nothing. The Empire's scholars had always believed the species had destroyed itself before ever leaving its own star system. But the reading on the screen didn't lie. The life form inside that pod was human. The message spread like a shockwave through the Empire. From the lowest workers to the highest ranks, everyone was talking about it. Some thought it was a trick. Others believed it was an omen. The Empress herself summoned her council for an emergency meeting. She demanded to know how such a thing was possible. Who had allowed this to happen? How could something enter Imperial space without warning or detection? No one had an answer. Orders were given immediately. A containment team was sent to intercept the object before it reached any populated system. They called it a controlled recovery. In truth, it was a rescue mission wrapped in fear. No one knew what the object might carry: disease, hidden technology, or something even worse. Days passed as the Empire tracked the pod's slow drift through the void. Every hour it grew closer. Fleet commanders watched nervously, their ships on full alert. The scientists studied every vibration it produced, every trace of energy, trying to understand what they were dealing with. But the readings made less and less sense the more they analyzed them. It was as if the object existed both inside and outside their reality, visible, yet unreachable. Finally, after several tense rotations, the pod slowed to a stop near an empty region of space, far from any star. It floated there silently, turning slowly as if waiting for them. The Imperial team moved in. Their ships formed a ring around it, their weapons offline but ready. Drones approached first, sending back live feeds. The outer surface of the pod was scratched and scorched, suggesting it had traveled through extreme heat. Its design was unlike anything known in the galaxy, simple, old-fashioned, built with materials the Empire had abandoned eons ago. There were markings on the metal, faded but readable. The letters were strange to most of the observers, but the archivists recognized them instantly. They were from a forgotten Earth language. The team brought the pod aboard a secured research vessel. Layers of scanning fields surrounded it. No one dared open it until every safety check was complete, but even through the protective walls the faint heartbeat continued. Whoever or whatever was inside was alive. Inside the command deck, silence filled the room as the lead scientist made his report to the Empire's council. "It's human," he said quietly, repeating the result one more time. "There's no genetic mutation, no hybridization, no trace of alien DNA. It's pure human." The words hit the council like thunder. For a moment no one spoke. Even the Empress, known for her calm, looked unsettled. They all knew what this meant. If the human was truly alive, it would challenge everything they believed about their history, their science, even their sense of control. The Empire prided itself on knowing every living thing in existence. To admit that a species they had recorded as extinct was suddenly back, without warning, without explanation, was unthinkable. But the evidence was there, undeniable. That night, across the galaxy, the story spread. In the great cities, people whispered that an ancient being had returned. On distant colonies, miners and traders argued over whether it was a ghost or a god. Some celebrated, believing the arrival of a human marked a new beginning. Others feared it was the start of an end. Meanwhile, on the quiet research vessel drifting above a red dwarf star, the pod lay still in its containment chamber. The scientists worked around the clock, studying its structure, searching for answers. The air inside the chamber shimmered faintly, like heat rising from the surface of a desert. Instruments went haywire when placed too close. Time itself seemed to bend near the edges. And yet, through all of that, the heart inside kept beating, slow, steady, human. One of the junior researchers stayed by the observation glass late into the night, watching. He couldn't stop thinking about what it meant. This wasn't just a biological discovery. It was a piece of living history, a reminder that the universe was far bigger and stranger than even the Empire's greatest minds could understand. He wondered what the human had seen, where he had come from, and how he had traveled so far without leaving any trace. As the hours passed, the light on the pod's control panel began to flicker. A faint glow appeared, pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat. The sensors picked up a shift in temperature. The researchers rushed in, surrounding the chamber. The readings climbed. Something inside was stirring, and then for the first time a faint sound echoed through the speakers. Soft, like a breath. The room froze. No one spoke. The scientists looked at each other, eyes wide with disbelief. The heartbeat quickened. The glow grew brighter, and just as one of them reached for the emergency control, the pod emitted a quiet mechanical click. Inside, a human hand moved. Everyone stepped back, fear and awe mixing in their faces. The hand pressed weakly against the glass from the inside. Then another breath came, clearer this time. The scanners confirmed it. The human was waking up. Outside, the stars seemed to hold their breath. Across the Empire, alarms sounded in command centers. Messages flashed through encrypted channels, and military divisions received new orders. The Empress herself watched the live feed from her throne room, expression unreadable. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Empire, something truly unknown had entered their world. Not an enemy, not a creature, but a single human being. No one knew what would happen next. But one thing was certain. The calm that had ruled the galaxy for so long had just been broken. The entire Galactic Empire was in chaos. The discovery of the human had spread like wildfire. Every news channel, every holoscreen, and every colony whispered about it. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a threat. But everyone felt the same thing: fear mixed with curiosity. In the capital world, the Empress held a private meeting in her chamber. The long silver walls glowed faintly, reflecting the cold light from the twin moons outside. The advisors stood in silence, waiting for her to speak. She looked at the large holographic projection floating above the table, a rotating image of the pod and the human sleeping inside it. "How did this happen?" she finally asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed unease. "We map every system, we track every particle in space. Yet this human appears without a trace. Who allowed it?" The room stayed quiet. No one dared to answer. The head of security finally stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, no one allowed it. It was simply there. It came from nowhere." The Empress leaned back in her chair. Her mind raced. For centuries, the Empire believed it controlled everything: nature, time, even fate. But this one event had shaken that illusion. Something had entered their perfect system without permission, without warning. Outside the palace, in the lower levels of the city, people argued in the streets. Some said the human was a messenger from the past, maybe a survivor of a forgotten civilization. Others whispered darker theories, that he was a weapon sent by an unseen enemy to test the Empire's strength. No one truly knew, but the fear grew by the hour. Meanwhile, far away from the capital, the research team that had recovered the pod worked day and night. The human was no longer unconscious. His vital signs were stable, but his brain activity was unusual, waves unlike anything recorded in modern science. It was as if his mind was trying to make sense of a reality completely foreign to him. Inside the containment room, the air was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. The human lay on a medical platform surrounded by transparent walls. The doctors and scientists watched from behind a barrier, taking notes, speaking in low voices. Every move he made, every breath he took was recorded. When he finally opened his eyes, the first thing he did was look around slowly. His expression showed confusion, not fear. He tried to sit up, but the restraint field gently held him in place. The lead scientist spoke through the translator device. "Can you hear me?" The man blinked, then nodded weakly. His voice came out rough, tired. "Where am I?" The scientists looked at each other in disbelief. He spoke in an ancient language that none of them had heard in real life, but their translators worked instantly. The sound of his words sent a strange feeling through the room. It wasn't just communication, it was history speaking again. "You are safe," the scientist replied. "We found you drifting in space. Do you remember how you got there?" The man looked confused. His hands trembled as he touched the smooth surface beneath him. "Drifting in space?" he repeated softly. "No, that can't be right. We were on a mission, an experiment. Something went wrong. The ship started to shake. Then everything turned white." He paused, looking up at the strange figures around him. "How long was I out?" The scientist hesitated. "We're still studying your craft, but based on our calculations, you've been traveling for over 1,000,000 cycles." The human stared blankly. "That's not possible." But the readings didn't lie. Somehow the small pod he was in had crossed both time and distance. It had traveled across the galaxy and across ages without leaving a trace. News of the human's awakening reached the capital instantly. The Empress ordered that no one outside the highest ranks should know he was conscious. She feared that if the public found out too soon, it would lead to unrest, so she commanded the scientists to keep everything secret until she decided what to do. Inside the laboratory, the man was slowly recovering. They gave him food, strange to him but edible, and he learned to use the translator embedded in the wall. He asked questions constantly. "What year is it? What planet am I on? Where is Earth?" The scientist tried to answer carefully. They told him that Earth no longer existed in any known records. Its location had been lost to time. Hearing this, the man went silent for a long while. His eyes stared at the wall, empty and distant. He finally whispered, "So, we failed." One of the younger researchers, moved by his sadness, stepped closer. "What do you mean?" He replied, "We wanted to reach the stars. We dreamed of other worlds, other lives. But it seems time left us behind." His words hung in the air. No one knew how to respond. Over the next few days, the Empire's scientists studied everything. The man's DNA, his clothing, the materials of his ship. Everything confirmed the same truth. He was completely human, untouched by mutation or enhancement. Even his heart rate and breathing matched the ancient data from Earth's historical archives. But something about him puzzled them more than anything else. The pod that carried him was surrounded by a faint energy field, something that bent space and time in ways the Empire had never seen. Their best engineers couldn't understand how it worked. The energy pattern had no known origin, no source, no fuel. It simply existed like a ripple that refused to fade. The Empress summoned her top advisors once more. "If this human's craft can move unseen through our borders," she said slowly, "then it can also be used by others. We must understand it before someone else does." One of the council members warned, "Your Majesty, this man is not our enemy. His ship is ancient. He seems lost," the Empress replied coldly. "That may be true, but history teaches that humans are unpredictable. If one could come here by accident, others could come by design." Back on the research vessel, the human began to recover faster. His body was strong despite the long sleep. The scientists started to allow him short walks inside the facility under close watch. He would often look through the observation windows at the endless stars outside. "I've never seen so many," he said softly once. "When I left home, we could only see them from the ground." The researcher beside him smiled faintly. "You're far from home now." He nodded slowly. "Maybe too far." One night as he slept, the sensors around his pod began to flicker again. The same strange energy signature that had surrounded his ship reappeared, stronger than before. The scientists rushed in, recording everything. The readings showed patterns, waves that looked almost like signals. When they slowed the data down, they realized the waves weren't random. They followed a rhythm, a code. The code translated into something incredible. It matched the pulse of his heartbeat. It was as if his very existence was linked to the energy field, as though it responded to him. The lead scientist presented this finding to the Imperial Council. "It's not just a machine," he explained. "It reacts to him almost like it's alive." The Empress listened carefully. "Can it be controlled?" "Not yet," the scientist admitted. "Every attempt to touch it directly results in system failures. It's like the field doesn't want us near it." The Empress gave a single command: "Keep studying it. No one else must know what it can do." But secrecy in an empire that large was impossible. Within days, rumors leaked. People claimed the human carried ancient powers. Some believed he was sent by the universe to test the empire's arrogance. Others thought he was a sign that the old times were returning, times when mortals defied gods and reached for the stars on their own. The Empress, worried by the growing curiosity, ordered strict information control. Yet even her closest guards began to wonder who this human really was. In the laboratory, the man began to sense the tension. He saw how the scientists whispered when they thought he couldn't hear. He noticed the extra guards at every door. One evening, as the younger researcher brought him food, he asked quietly, "Do they fear me?" The researcher hesitated, then answered honestly, "They don't understand you. That scares them." He nodded slowly, looking at the stars again. "That fear is the same everywhere. Even where I came from." Days turned into weeks. The Empire's brightest minds failed to replicate the strange energy. Their machines could record it but not recreate it. The human remained patient, though a sadness grew in his eyes. One morning, as the research team prepared another round of tests, the lead scientist entered the observation room to find the pod glowing faintly again. The readings showed rising energy levels. The human stood near the chamber window watching. "It's calling me," he said softly. "What is?" the scientist asked. He looked back with calm eyes. "The same thing that brought me here." Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered across the entire station. The hum of machines grew louder, almost like a low heartbeat echoing through metal walls. The strange energy surrounded the pod completely, shimmering like a blue mist. Then, just as suddenly, everything went still. The readings dropped to normal. The glow vanished, but deep down, everyone knew this was only the beginning. Far away in the capital, the Empress received the report. She stared out the window into the dark stretch of stars and whispered, "If one human could come here unnoticed, how many more could be waiting in the dark?" Her words carried across the silent hall, and for the first time in centuries, the mighty galactic empire felt something it hadn't known in generations: uncertainty. The morning after the strange light surrounded the pod, the research station was silent. No one spoke much. Everyone could feel something had changed. The energy that had filled the air the night before still seemed to hum faintly through the walls, like a memory that refused to fade. The human sat quietly in his room, looking out through the glass. He seemed calmer than before, almost peaceful. The scientists, however, were restless. They had run every scan they could imagine, but the data made no sense. The readings didn't follow any known pattern. The energy had appeared and vanished as if it had never existed. Yet all the machines in the room showed signs of brief overload, as though something powerful had passed through them. The lead scientist stood before the control screen, replaying the footage again and again. The glow around the pod seemed to respond directly to the human's heartbeat. It pulsed when he was awake and faded when he slept. It was not random. It was connected to him in ways they couldn't explain. When the human noticed their confusion, he asked softly, "What are you trying to find?" The scientist turned toward him, unsure how much to say. "We want to understand how your craft moved through space," he said. "It crossed barriers that even our fastest ships cannot. It should be impossible." The man listened carefully. After a long silence, he said, "Where I come from, we didn't know much about space either. We just kept trying, maybe it wasn't the ship that did it." The scientist frowned. "Then what was it?" The man looked down at his hands. "Maybe it was something beyond the ship. Something that pulled me here." His answer only deepened their mystery. Over the next few days, the Empire sent more experts to the station: physicists, historians, language specialists. They all wanted to see the human for themselves. Some treated him like a specimen. Others saw him as a living key to an ancient past. But the human himself seemed uninterested in their questions. He often stared out at the stars, lost in thought. One night, the young researcher who had been kind to him earlier sat near his room and asked quietly, "Do you miss your home?" He nodded slowly. "Every moment," he said. "But I'm not sure if home still exists. Maybe it's just a memory now." She hesitated before asking, "If you could go back, would you?" He smiled faintly. "I think so. Even if everything is gone, I'd still want to see it one last time." There was something honest and sad in his voice. For the first time, the researcher felt sorry for him, not as a subject but as a person who had lost everything. Meanwhile, back in the capital, the Empress was growing impatient. Weeks had passed and the scientists still had no answers. The council kept arguing. Some said the human was harmless, others warned that he was a threat. One advisor spoke boldly during a meeting. "Your Majesty," he said, "this man's arrival has already caused panic in parts of the Empire. People are saying old myths are coming true. Some even believe humans are returning to take back the stars. We need to act before these ideas spread." The Empress listened quietly, then said, "And what do you suggest?" "We should isolate him permanently," the advisor said. "Keep him away from the public, perhaps in a secure facility where no information can leak." Another council member disagreed. "That would make things worse. If he disappears, people will think we are hiding something greater. The fear will only grow." The Empress looked between them, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, "Then bring him to me. I want to see him with my own eyes." The order sent shockwaves through the research team. No human had ever stood before the ruler of the Galactic Empire. But the command could not be refused. The next day, the human was transported under heavy guard to the capital world. The journey took several days. As he looked out from the ship's observation deck, he saw worlds unlike anything he had imagined. Cities floating above oceans of gas, towers taller than mountains, ships larger than continents. When they arrived, the capital shone like a jewel in the black sea of space. The air was filled with lights from thousands of vessels moving in perfect order. The empire was vast, powerful, and impossibly advanced. He was led through endless corridors of glass and metal until he reached the main hall. There, under the massive dome of the palace, the Empress waited. She sat upon a high seat surrounded by silent guards. The moment he entered, the room grew still. Everyone's eyes followed him as he walked slowly forward. The Empress studied him carefully. She had seen thousands of alien species in her lifetime, but none like this one. So simple, so fragile, and yet so calm. "You are the one who came here without warning," she said. Her voice was steady, almost cold. "No signal, no trace. You entered my empire as if from thin air. How is that possible?" The man hesitated, then said quietly, I wish I knew. I didn't mean to come here. I was just trying to survive. The Empress leaned forward slightly. You are human. Our records say your kind vanished long before our empire was born. How are you alive? He shook his head. I don't know how much time has passed. To me, it feels like hours. Maybe what I thought was space was something else. Her expression softened slightly. Do you understand where you are now? He looked up at the ceiling where a holographic map of the empire glowed, a web of light stretching across millions of stars. You've built something beautiful, he said quietly. But I can feel your people are afraid. Her eyes narrowed. Afraid of what? Of the unknown, he replied. Of losing control. You've mapped every world, yet you fear what you can't see. The Empress stared at him for a long moment, then dismissed the guards with a wave of her hand. The hall grew quiet. She said softly, perhaps you're right. But that doesn't change what you are. A question we don't know how to answer. After a long silence, she added, until we understand you, you will remain under observation. He simply nodded. I understand. He was taken to a quiet residence within the palace walls. It wasn't a prison, but it wasn't freedom either. From his window, he could see the endless city stretching toward the horizon. The people moved in perfect patterns, their lives guided by order and rules. It was peaceful, but it also felt lifeless to him. He began to write on a small pad they gave him, sketching images of Earth as he remembered it, the oceans, the mountains, the clouds, and the old cities filled with noise and chaos. When the young researcher visited him later to check on his health, she found his sketches scattered across the floor. They look so different from our worlds, she said softly. He smiled faintly, maybe because they were real. Imperfect but alive. She looked at him curiously. Do you think humans will ever return? He gazed at the stars outside. Maybe not as you expect, but I think life always finds a way. If I'm here, maybe that means something still connects us. Meanwhile, the Empire's scientists continued their work in secret. They had moved the pod to a hidden facility deep under the surface of a barren moon. Despite countless experiments, they couldn't understand how it worked. The material resisted every attempt to cut or scan it. Some believed it wasn't built. It had formed naturally like a living thing. During one of the tests, the energy signature briefly activated again. The readings spiked across all systems, disrupting communications for several minutes. When the systems returned, the pod's surface had changed. It now showed faint symbols, glowing across it. The scientist analyzed the markings and realized they were similar to the same language the human had spoken when they first found him. When the message was decoded, it read, "Return him." The Empire's leaders were alarmed. They wondered if someone or something was trying to retrieve the human. The Empress called an emergency meeting that lasted through the night. Finally, she decided that the pod would remain under lockdown. But deep inside, she began to feel something she had not felt in a long time. Doubt. As for the human, he began to sense that something was happening. His dreams became strange. He would wake up hearing faint whispers, feeling weightless as though he were falling through stars. Each time he woke, the feeling grew stronger. One night, he stood at his window looking up at the 2 moons hanging in the dark sky. If I wasn't meant to be here, he whispered, then maybe something will take me back. And far away, hidden beneath the Empire's most guarded facility, the pod's lights began to glow again, slowly at first, then brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat that matched his own. No one noticed it yet, but soon the Empire would, and when they did, the fear that had begun with a single heartbeat would spread once again, across every corner of the stars. The man's eyes opened slowly. The light above him was dim but cold, and the air smelled like metal and dust. For a long moment, he didn't know where he was. His mind was foggy, heavy. His last memory was of his small spacecraft shaking violently, alarms flashing, and then a bright flash that swallowed everything. Now there was silence. When he tried to move, he noticed his arms were held by soft restraints. There were machines around him, some floating, some fixed to the floor, scanning his body with faint blue light. He wasn't in any hospital he knew of. The walls seemed alive, moving slightly, as if breathing. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. A sound came from one corner of the room. A shape moved closer, tall and thin, covered in a long metallic robe that shimmered like liquid glass. The figure had no face, just a dark mask with glowing lines that shifted like waves. When it spoke, its voice was calm and clear, but it didn't sound human. Do you understand this language? it asked. The man blinked, confused. The words reached his ears in English, but the tone was off, as if spoken through a machine. He swallowed and nodded weakly. Yes, I can understand you. Where am I? There was a pause, a kind of digital hesitation. You are safe, the voice replied. We detected your vessel near the Imperial border. You are in containment for observation. The man's heart began to race. Imperial border? Containment? He looked around again. The technology, the shape of the room, it was unlike anything he'd seen even in the most advanced human labs. It didn't make sense. Who are you people? He asked. We are the Galactic Empire, the voice said simply. And you are? Human, the man frowned. Of course I'm human. What else would I be? The figure turned slightly as if studying him from a different angle. Humanity was believed extinct for over 1 million cycles. Yet here you are. The words hit him like a shock. Extinct 1 million cycles? He didn't understand. Maybe he'd misheard. Maybe it was some kind of dream. But deep inside, something told him this was real. Over the next few hours, or what felt like hours, different beings came to see him. Some looked part machine. Some were covered in silver scales, others glowed faintly like mist. They asked questions, endless questions, about Earth, about his mission, about how he had arrived there without being detected. They didn't seem angry or violent, but deeply unsettled, almost afraid. When they finally left him alone, he stared up at the ceiling and whispered to himself, How long have I been gone? He didn't know that his simple presence had thrown an entire empire into panic. Across distant systems, ships were being moved, scientists were debating, and leaders were arguing over what to do. For the first time in thousands of years, the Galactic Empire faced something it could not predict. A human who appeared out of nowhere, from a world that was supposed to be gone. The next day, or what he thought was the next day, the same masked being returned. This time it carried a small floating device that projected light between them, forming a soft holographic image, a map of galaxies, swirling like a giant sea of stars. Do you recognize this? The being asked. He stared at it. That's not our chart. But this looks like the Milky Way right there. He pointed to a small cluster on the far edge. That's home. The being tilted its head slightly. Home, it repeated. That region has been uninhabitable for several eons. Radiation storms, collapsed stars, no sign of sentient life. The man's heart sank. That can't be right. Earth was alive. We had millions of people. We were exploring space. We were learning so much. He stopped himself, trying to piece things together. The fold in space his ship had entered, it wasn't just a few minutes of turbulence. Maybe it had thrown him forward through time. Maybe. He was the last human left. The being watched him silently. Then it said, Your arrival has created fear. You bypassed all our detection systems. That has never happened. Our rulers demand to know how. I don't know, he said quietly. I didn't even mean to come here. I was just trying to survive. The being looked at him for a long moment. Then the mask's lines shifted to a softer tone, like dim light pulsing slowly. You say you come in peace? Yes, he whispered. I just want to understand what happened. For the next several days they ran tests, blood samples, scans, memory readings. Everything confirmed what the Empire already feared. He was human. A being of flesh and bone, simple in form yet incredibly complex inside. His DNA contained patterns they hadn't seen in any living species for ages. To the scientists, he was living history, a legend made real. Meanwhile, across the Empire's capital, meetings continued day and night. The Empress, known for her calm rule, was now restless. Every leader, every advisor kept asking the same question. If this human arrived undetected, what if others can too? The possibility terrified them. The Empire's power relied on its control, its ability to see everything, predict everything. A species that could move unseen broke that illusion. Some officials suggested eliminating him quietly, erasing all records. Others argued that he might hold knowledge the Empire could use. In the end, the Empress decided he would live for now, but under strict observation. His ship and every trace of his arrival were classified as top secret. Only a small circle of high officials and scientists knew the truth. Back in his chamber, the man slowly regained strength. The more he learned from his caretakers, the more he realized how much the universe had changed. The Empire had erased all history of humans long ago, labeling them a failed species. But the archives didn't tell why. They only said humans had destroyed themselves, leaving their home uninhabitable. He sat for hours, staring at the holographic map. Somewhere out there, maybe light years away, was the ghost of his home planet, Earth, now nothing but dust. He thought of his family, his friends, all the people who had once looked at the night sky with wonder. The thought crushed him. One night, while the room's lights dimmed into their sleep cycle, the being he'd first met returned. This time it didn't come with scanners or guards. It simply stood beside his bed and asked softly, "When you look at this place, what do you feel?" He thought for a while before answering. Small, lost, but also amazed. "You've built something incredible. I just don't know why everyone seems afraid of me," the being said, "because you are what they cannot explain. In our history, humans were known as unpredictable, curious, and resistant to control. The idea that one could appear again frightens those who built their power on certainty." He smiled faintly. "That sounds about right." The being turned to leave, then stopped. "Do not be afraid. There are some who believe your return is not a threat, but a message. Perhaps time itself is trying to tell us something." After it left, he couldn't sleep. He lay awake, thinking about the fold in space, the strange light, and how easily he might have died. Instead, he had become the center of a mystery bigger than anything humanity had ever known. Outside his room, the Empire's ships patrolled the borders. Scientists worked nonstop to understand how his pod had crossed space without being seen. They discovered faint traces of energy around the vessel, patterns that didn't match any known propulsion or defense field. It wasn't just human technology. It was something natural, something the universe itself had created. As the Empire studied it, they grew more anxious. The field seemed unstable but powerful enough to distort space and time. It might have been what carried him here. But if it could happen once, it could happen again. And so a quiet order spread across the Empire. Increase surveillance, strengthen shields, prepare for the unknown. All because of one lost human. In his isolation, he began writing, or at least trying to. The Empire gave him a device that could record his words in light form. He spoke softly to it every day, describing his memories of blue skies, green forests, and the hum of cities filled with life. He didn't know if anyone would ever hear them, but it helped him remember who he was. Weeks passed. The scientists said they were close to understanding the strange energy around his ship, but deep inside the man felt uneasy. He could sense something in the air, an unspoken tension. He was being studied not just for knowledge but for control. One evening he looked out through the transparent wall of his chamber and saw the stars. They seemed endless, like scattered diamonds. He whispered, "Maybe I wasn't meant to find home again. Maybe I was meant to remind them what it means to be human." He didn't know it yet, but his presence had already changed everything. For the first time in thousands of years, the Galactic Empire was questioning its own certainty. And somewhere, deep in the darkness between stars, the energy that brought him there began to stir again. The Empire could not rest. Ever since the arrival of the human, its calm order had started to break. Every system, every council meeting, every conversation among leaders had changed. What once felt like a powerful, stable galaxy now felt fragile, uncertain, and afraid. The Empress herself, who rarely showed emotion, had started to lose sleep. Her advisors filled her days with reports about the human anomaly. Each one ended the same way: no answers, no clear data, no control. And that was what scared them the most. They could measure black holes, control weather, and even bend gravity. But they could not explain one human who had appeared from nowhere, breaking every rule they understood. Inside the observation station where the man was kept, time passed slowly. The people studying him had grown quieter. They spoke less often, avoided long talks, and seemed weighed down by the tension spreading across the Empire. The man noticed it. Even though he was still treated kindly, he could feel the fear behind their eyes. He wasn't a soldier or a threat. He was just a human being trying to understand where he had landed and what had happened to his world. But to them, he was something more, something unpredictable. One day, a group of council members arrived at the station. They wanted to see the human themselves. He was brought into a large circular room filled with bright white light and floating screens. The air felt thick like a courtroom. The Empress appeared through a large projection, her figure tall and calm, her voice echoing softly through the air. "You are the human who crossed our borders without detection," she said. He nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to. My ship went through some kind of fold. A rift in space. I just wanted to survive. The room was silent. The Empress studied him for a long time, her glowing eyes unreadable. Our empire has existed for thousands of generations. No life has entered our space undetected. You changed that.
Tell me how.
I wish I knew, he said. His voice was calm but tired. Where I come from, humans were still learning how space worked. We never reached this far. I think something went wrong with my ship. It pushed me through time itself. His answer didn't satisfy them. The Empire's scientists had examined his ship hundreds of times. It carried no advanced technology, no hidden weapons, and yet somehow it had created an energy field that even their most powerful scanners couldn't explain. The Empress's tone softened, but there was still command in it. Do you realize what your presence means for us? He looked down for a moment. I think so, he said quietly. You're afraid, not of me, but of what I represent. You thought humans were gone. But if I'm here, then maybe you were wrong about more than that. A murmur spread through the council. His words struck a nerve. The Empress said nothing. For a moment, even her calm mask cracked slightly. Then she spoke again. You will remain under protection until we decide what must be done. You will not be harmed, but you must tell us everything you know. He nodded, knowing he didn't have much choice. After the hearing, he was taken back to his room, but something had changed. The guards were closer now, the lights brighter, and even his conversations were recorded. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was a mystery the Empire needed to control. Still, there were those within the Empire who saw something different in him. A small group of scientists and historians had begun to study ancient records of human civilization. The more they learned, the more they realized how strange and powerful humanity had been. Humans had no advanced technology in their early days, no powerful energy sources like the Empire. But they had something else, imagination. The ability to create, adapt, and rise again after every fall. One scientist whispered to another, maybe that's why they fear him. Because they know what humans can do once they start dreaming. Meanwhile, the man spent his days writing in his small digital journal. He wrote about Earth, the warmth of the sun, the sound of rain, the laughter of children, the way the ocean smelled after a storm. He described cities that reached the sky and people who worked hard just to make their world a little better. He didn't know if anyone would ever read those words, but he wrote anyway. It was the only thing that made him feel human. Then one night something strange happened. The energy around his ship, the same mysterious force that had carried him there, started to pulse again. The Empire's scientists noticed it first. Their machines picked up faint waves rippling through space as if something invisible was waking up. The news spread fast. Some thought it was a sign that more humans were coming. Others believed it was a weapon. Fear spread like wildfire. Inside his room, alarms started flashing. The floor trembled lightly and the lights turned red. He ran to the window and saw the faint glow of his ship through the glass barrier. It was surrounded by blue light spinning softly like a living star. Moments later, the door opened and the same masked being who had spoken to him before rushed in. It's happening again, the voice said urgently. The energy field, it's active. He looked at the being, confused and scared. What does that mean? Is it dangerous? We don't know, the being replied. The Empress has ordered all systems to contain it, but we can't. It doesn't respond to our technology. He stared out at his ship again, his heart pounding. Maybe it's reacting to me. The being hesitated. Why would it? I don't know. But it brought me here, didn't it? Maybe it's trying to take me back. The being seemed to think about it, then lowered its voice. If that is true, you must tell no one. The council would never allow you to leave. They fear what you could reveal about us. He nodded slowly, his mind racing. He didn't want to cause harm, but he also couldn't live trapped forever. If there was even a small chance that the energy could return him home, or at least to another world, he had to take it. That night, he sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the glowing walls. His heart was heavy. He thought about the people who had tried to understand him, the scientists who were kind, and even the Empress, who ruled with both fear and grace. But he also thought about home, about Earth and everything it stood for. He whispered softly to himself, maybe this is my purpose. Not to stay, but to remind them what they forgot. The following day, the Empire held another emergency meeting. The energy field had grown stronger overnight, creating small gravitational waves that affected nearby satellites. The scientists were scared to approach it, afraid it might explode or vanish completely. The Empress looked at the readings and said, "We cannot let it escape. If this human's power can cross our barriers, we must contain it." But even as she spoke deep inside, she wasn't sure if it could be stopped. The man was moved to another room farther from the ship, surrounded by guards, but he didn't resist. He stayed calm, waiting. He could feel the energy like a heartbeat in the air calling to him. Hours passed. The Empire's systems flickered, lights dimmed, and the sound of alarms echoed through the hallways. The scientists shouted reports trying to stabilize the power levels. Then, just before dawn, the field reached its peak. A soft, blinding light filled the station and everything went silent. When the light faded, the room where his ship had been was empty. The guards searched. The scientists ran checks, but there was nothing left. No man, no ship, no energy signature. The human had vanished. For a long time, no one spoke. The Empire sent search teams across the border systems, scanning every corner of space, but they found nothing. It was as if he had never existed. And yet the next morning, across several communication channels, a single message appeared. It was short, written in ancient human language. "Don't fear what you don't understand. I never meant to intrude." The message repeated once, then disappeared. The Empress stared at the translation on her screen for a long time. For the first time in her reign, she didn't know what to say. Around her, her advisors whispered nervously, wondering what it meant. She finally said quietly, "Erase all public records. Let no one know what happened here." But even as she gave the order, she knew the truth couldn't be buried forever. Something inside her had changed. Somewhere out there beyond their scanners was proof that the universe still held mysteries they could never control. And for the first time, the Galactic Empire felt small. After the light faded and the human disappeared, silence filled the Empire. For a long time, no one moved, no one spoke. The great halls that once buzzed with orders and voices now felt hollow. Every screen showed blank static. The only proof that something extraordinary had happened was the faint memory of that blinding light. The scientists tried to understand what they had witnessed, but nothing made sense. The readings were incomplete. Their machines had stopped recording during the exact 6 seconds the light appeared. It was as if time itself had paused, leaving no trace of what had truly happened. The Empress called an emergency meeting in the High Chamber. Her advisors stood in a circle, each more nervous than the next. Reports flooded in from the border outposts. Strange waves had rippled through space, reaching far beyond their systems. Some said they saw the same flash in distant regions, like a silent echo traveling across the stars. The Empress spoke calmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "He is gone," she said, "and with him something we cannot explain. We will record this incident under restricted archives. No word of it will reach the public." The others nodded quickly, but everyone in that room knew they had seen something beyond their control. For generations, the Empire had believed it ruled everything, that its sensors could see across all corners of space, that no being could move without detection. But now, one human had appeared without warning and vanished just as suddenly, and it terrified them. Back in the observation station, the room where the man had stayed was left untouched. His bed was neatly made, the small recording device still sitting on the table. When one of the scientists activated it, a soft voice filled the air. It was his. He spoke slowly, with calm and warmth in his tone, as if he knew someone would find it after he was gone. "If you're hearing this, I guess my journey is done," his voice said. "I don't know where I'll end up or if I'll ever see home again, but I want you to know something. Fear only grows when we stop trying to understand. I didn't come here to harm anyone. I just wanted to survive. Maybe the universe wanted us to meet, to remind us that even in endless darkness, there's always something new waiting to be found." The scientists listened in silence. None of them spoke for a long time after the recording ended. Some felt shame, others awe. One of them whispered, "He wasn't our enemy. He was just human." Days turned into weeks, and the story slowly faded into whispers. The Empire erased records, rewrote reports, and even deleted communication logs. But rumors spread in quiet corners. Some said the human had returned to his world. Others claimed he became part of the energy field that brought him there, traveling forever through space like a silent observer. Yet strange things began to happen after his disappearance. The Empire's long-range scanners started picking up faint pulses, signals with no source repeating at irregular intervals. When decoded, they revealed fragments of ancient human languages. Simple words like peace, home, and hope. The scientists tried to trace the origin, but every time they did, the signal moved farther away, as if it was leading them somewhere, or keeping its distance. The Empress grew quieter. She spent long hours alone, looking out at the stars from her private observatory. Those who worked close to her noticed that she often replayed the human's final message in secret. It was as if something inside her had changed. For the first time, she began questioning everything she had believed about power and control. The Empire had built its strength on fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of chaos, fear of losing order. But this one man, who had no army and no weapons, had shown her that fear wasn't the same as safety. It was just another kind of prison. Months passed, and slowly small shifts began across the galaxy. The Empire's scientists were allowed to study more ancient records of extinct civilizations. Travel restrictions to unexplored regions were eased. Curiosity, once forbidden, began to grow again. Some called it the Echo Era, named after the mysterious signals that still drifted through space. Faint but constant. In one of the remote colonies, a young observer working late one night picked up another signal. At first, she thought it was background noise, but then she heard it clearly. A human voice. Soft, tired, but unmistakably real. "Don't fear what you don't understand," the voice said. "I never meant to intrude." The same message that had once appeared on the Empire's channels now echoed again, across countless worlds. When the report reached the Empress, she didn't react with panic. Instead, she smiled faintly, the first true smile anyone had seen on her face in years. "Let it be," she said. "Maybe it's not a warning. Maybe it's a reminder." Meanwhile, far beyond the Empire's reach, in a quiet stretch of space where no sensors could reach, a small craft floated gently. Inside, the man stirred. He was alive. The light around him had dimmed, and he felt an unfamiliar peace. Through the glass, he could see a new galaxy glowing in the distance, different from any chart he had seen before. He didn't know how much time had passed or if time even mattered anymore. The ship's systems were silent, but something deep inside told him he was safe. He reached for the recording device beside him and smiled softly. "Guess I'm not done yet," he whispered. The ship drifted on, carried by the same invisible force that had once brought him to the Empire. Only this time it seemed calmer, more controlled, as if it knew where it was going. The man leaned back and closed his eyes, thinking about the people he had met. The curious scientists, the quiet being who had shown kindness, even the Empress who had feared him but also learned from him. He hoped they had changed. Back in the Empire, generations would pass. The story of the invisible human became legend, told in quiet voices to children who looked up at the stars. Some believed he was a traveler sent by the universe to test their humility. Others thought he was proof that life could never be fully contained. In time, the Empire stopped calling him a threat and began calling him the first visitor. Monuments were built in his memory, not of his face, since no one had captured it, but of his ship carved in shining stone, surrounded by words he had once spoken. Fear only grows when we stop trying to understand. That message became the foundation of a new movement. The Empire began to value exploration again, not just conquest. People started to study old worlds, rediscovering forgotten histories, including Earth, the planet once believed dead. Centuries later, explorers from the Empire found what was left of the solar system. The planets were cold, the sun dimmer, but something strange was found orbiting the empty space where Earth once existed. A small cluster of light fragments moving together, forming shapes like letters. When translated, the symbols formed a single word: home. No one knew who or what created it. Some said it was the remains of the energy that had once carried the human. Others believed it was him, still traveling, still watching, still searching for the place he came from. The Empress, now old and weary, stood one last time in her observatory, staring at the report. She whispered softly, "Maybe humans never truly die. Maybe they just move forward beyond what we can see." And somewhere, deep in the endless stretch of stars, the faint hum of the human ship continued, echoing through the void. A reminder that even in the largest empire, even among countless species and worlds, one small heartbeat could still change everything. The empire eventually evolved. New generations grew up under a sky no longer ruled by fear. They learned about the human who came from nowhere and vanished without a trace. And they spoke of him not as a ghost but as a sign that life was meant to be free, unpredictable and full of wonder. And on quiet nights, when the stars were bright and the galaxies shimmered like oceans, travelers claimed they sometimes heard a voice carried by the cosmic wind. A calm, human voice saying gently, "I never meant to intrude. I only came to remind you how to feel alive again." Whether it was real or just imagination, no one could say. But every time they heard it, they felt something. A spark, a warmth. A reminder that even across galaxies, the spirit of humanity still lived on. And somewhere out there among the countless stars, a small ship continued its silent journey, gliding through time, carrying a single man who had once frightened an empire and then taught it something it had forgotten long ago. That being human wasn't about power or control. It was about hope. The galaxy, vast and ancient, would never forget the moment when one human appeared without warning, without detection, then vanished again, leaving behind not fear, but a story that would echo forever.